Alright guys, if you remember this from a past episode, we called this Ultimate Exhaust. This is a beautiful Z06 convertible, spec'd. I showed you this before, but it's spec'd out. Absolutely beautiful. It's got exposed carbon, it's got the red stitching, it's got Alcantara, red seat belts. This thing is beautiful. So last video we did the full titanium Akropovic exhaust. This thing, it's almost a shame to hide it because it looks so pretty. Well, let me tell you what we're doing next on this, and I'll tell you why. We're going to do a Katech throttle body and something else I'll show you in a minute. The throttle bodies, I'm going to show you a stock one to give you an idea, but there is a hump in the throttle body, and it's designed to kind of make the car a little bit less sensitive, make it a little dull on the bottom end, because obviously 650 horsepower, not used to a car like this with a manual, you can take off and break the tires loose and be difficult to take off. So they dull the power down by putting a hump in the throttle body, so as you crack the plate, in fact, let me go show you a factory one. Okay, so this is a factory throttle body, a brand new throttle body. It's never been installed, but this would actually sit this way. Now the hump, if you open the blade right here, you can see this hump, and it's a pretty large lifted area. If I can get the angle right, you can see it. But basically, as that throttle body opens, it stays, keeps that hole closed longer. You see that before it actually opens, before it actually cracks. This also gives it a mushy feeling to a point. The car almost feels like it stalls right off idle. If you was to take off, you can kind of feel the car kind of fall on its face, and then it feels like it wakes up. And it's this hump right here. I've done it on a few of my C7s. So what the aftermarket world do, there's a few companies out there, I'm not going to name them all, but basically what they do is they're going to bore it and take most of that hump out there. They're going to round it off. Some of them take it out completely, but there's no gains up top from what I've seen on our dyno, but we've seen a ton of power on the bottom end with this. But as you see, they take most of that hump out, if I can get the angle just right. So as this throttle body cracks, it makes a direct path right away. You see that it doesn't have an obstruction. Of course, this one was done by Katech. This is the one that I would typically use. I recommend it in this one. I've used it in the past, but to be honest, there's a bunch of them out there. They all do about the same thing. Everyone claims that theirs is better. It's kind of like a color. Pick your favorite color. I haven't seen a big gain in them, but this is the one we choose. But look at that. You see it makes a direct path as soon as you crack that blade. This makes a massive difference. I can't describe how much of a difference this makes just by driving a manual car. All right, so this is the other part that he purchased. Now, this doesn't make a massive amount of power, but it's a nicer design. It does increase power a little bit, but the fact that it's a GM part, you're not going to void the warranty, and you're not going to change the air-fuel ratio. So this is GM's performance intake. I'm just going to take it over to the car and show you where it goes. It's going to replace the air box. It has a much smoother inlet, a high flow filter, but it's going to replace that piece right there. It's going to sit in the same orientation. It's got the right diameter here. The MAF sensor is perfect. It's got the nice flange. The diameter is correct. A lot of aftermarket intakes, you guys know this, they make the increased diameter tube. It leans the car out. The car makes a little bit of power for 2 or 3 runs on the dyno, and then torque management kicks in. It starts to pull the power out, and after maybe a dozen runs, the power goes back to stock. We'll try a few different intakes, but I stay out of the intake debate because obviously it's a pretty controversial subject. But this, it's good for about 15 horsepower on this car, but it looks nice. And again, it's not going to void your warranty. It's a GM part. Okay, so we got the intake off. It's pretty easy piece to take off, but just take your time. Make sure you remove this clip here. Don't bend these lines. Don't bend it on the radiator. There is a fitting down here. Also, this is a plastic housing, so don't go pulling up on this. This is a new car, so everything is in really good shape, but if you was to get one of these cars, it's 5-10 years old, this plastic might be harder. Tugging up on this, I've seen people install it. It makes me nervous to see them putting it on, but I see them pulling up on these wires, these hoses. Just be extra careful. Throttle body's pretty easy, 4 bolts, no water going through it, just an electrical connector. But let me show you the intake compared to the old one. All right, so this is the stock intake. It's obviously the same shape filter, but you can see the area around it is quite a bit smaller here. It's pretty tight to the filter, and it's a paper element filter. The new GM Performance one is larger room around it. Let me get it in the light. You see actually how much area there is around it, and it's a higher flow filter. It's kind of like one of the K&N style filters, much higher flowing filter. In stock form, I think they're only seeing about 10-12 horsepower, but the fact that it's more efficient, if you ever take one of these cars on the road course, you suddenly find out the difference between one-time horsepower on a dyno and efficiency. So I'll show you that one right there. Now we've got the light behind me, and then if you look at the factory piece, it's not as much room around that filter, so it doesn't flow as much air. So it's a pretty easy install. I'm not going to show you step by step, but I'll just tell you, these pieces do come off right here. There is the two mounting points here, and then the rubber piece fits right back into the new GM piece. But before we put that on, we're going to change the throttle body. This is the Katech throttle body. Let's remove the old one first. Again, I'll show you, it's very, very easy. Okay, so this is the actual throttle body. You can see a little bit more noticeable now. You can see how defined this step is here, and the Katech one, they basically remove a lot of that soft and that. You see, as this blade cracks, it's already allowing air to pass through here, whereas this one, as this cracks, it doesn't really open this as drastically. It takes almost, it's like it follows this ledge and keeps that blade closed a little bit longer. It just allows a little bit less air to go through here. Now, I have heard of some companies that take this completely out, and it makes the car almost where it's difficult to drive. It kind of bucks, and this is a really good compromise. I've had this on 2 of my personal cars. This makes a world of difference. This, if you're gonna do anything to your C7 Z06 manual, do a throttle body, trust me. I've seen on our dyno, we saw a ton of power down low. I'm not going to quote the numbers because people are going to say that it's not correct, but it's amazing how much power it makes down low. I haven't seen any power up top, but the biggest difference is the drivability. Right off idle, the car is crisp. It feels like it wants to go. It's so amazing when you go from this to this. This makes it almost feel like it wants to stall. It makes it kind of feel like it falls on its face. If you're a tuner, it gives you the feeling that the car is lean. If you drive a car and it feels like it's kind of falling over and then it kind of wakes up, it gives you that feeling. It feels like you need to go and highlight that map and put some fuel in there. It gives you that kind of feeling. Okay, so if you're going to do this in your driveway, it is super easy. You've got 4 bolts right here and the electrical connector right here. Super easy. This is a rubber gasket. It's actually embossed into the snout of the supercharger. You're not going to need to replace the gasket. No water is going to come out. It couldn't be easier. This is literally a 30-minute job. Okay, so we're all back together. Make sure everything is plugged back in. Make sure your connector here is back. Your mass air, it has the lock. Make sure it's pushed in on the lock. It's all the way down. Same on the TPS. Connector right here. Make sure these clamps are seated right. Make sure they're tight. We can officially start this car up, but you shouldn't have any check engine lights. So everything is good. We're going to let it idle, let it basically learn the throttle body. It's going to adjust the fuel trims. That's nice because it's got the red showing through there. That's actually kind of a nice touch. So we're going to let it idle for about 10 minutes, let it adjust its fuel trims, make sure it's happy, and then we'll give you some sound clips. How about that? Alright, so I'm not going to drive it. When the customer comes back, I'm going to see if I can get him to drive it and get his input, what he thinks. But just right here, try this. Just as you take off, just kind of do this. And they almost feel like they stumble a little bit, not in neutral, but when you're actually in gear, when you take it off, as you try and creep away like this, they almost feel like they're lean and they kind of fall on their face. You do the throttle body, it wakes it right up. It gives it just that really crisp. I mean, even just blipping it on idle, it makes a significant difference right here, just barely touching the gas. But that's the most noticeable gain from the throttle body. The intake, you should see a little bit of performance everywhere. Down the road, I'm going to see if we can put this car in the dyno and verify it from where it was bone stock, just to kind of give you kind of a side-by-side comparison. All right, customer's picking it up. He's going to take it for a quick drive, get his perspective. Oh yeah, you're going to need that key, aren't you? I'm so afraid I'll lock the car. I keep taking the key. So he's going to go ahead and drive it, get a quick feel of it, and come back. We'll do a quick interview with him, get his perspective of the difference, the way it drives. We're not talking about full throttle, wide open racing. We're talking about the right off idle, slow RPM, taking off from a light kind of feel from that throttle body. So he'll come back after a short ride. All right, so he's back. Let's get an idea of the difference, if it is noticeable. All right, so now you took it for a drive. Give me your opinion. What do you think?
Well, it changed the low-end acceleration tremendously. It's a rocket ship.
It feels crisp though, right? It's
really
like
crisp.
It's right off idle, it's got power, it doesn't feel like it wants to do that kind of stalling feeling.
There's no stall. It's just instant on.
And it makes the car feel way faster than what it is.
It's frightening. It's frightening. Between, you know, the exhaust and the cold air intake and the throttle body, I mean, this thing feels like it's a rocket ship.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had some fast cars.
That's awesome.
It's way beyond anything that I've had.
That's fantastic. That's what I was telling you. I didn't want you to do a whole bunch of mods and waste your time doing things. I wanted you to get good power for the money you're spending, and this car sounds absolutely fantastic.
It's unbelievable. I really appreciate everything you've done. And
absolutely.
Made my dream come true.
That's awesome. I'm so happy. I tell you what, open the valves, give it a couple of blips. Let's get some sound clips from outside the car. I'd rather you do it than me do it. That thing sounds insane. All right, it is done. He's excited, and like I was telling you, it's got way more power down low than most people realize.